And good evening. We are live here in the Trinity Channel's ABN studios, and I'm not sure what camera to look at. I'm a little rusty here. Here, I'll go with this one. Chris Conway here, live in the studio. So glad that you're here watching us tonight. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here from our studio, and I say our because I'm sharing the studio with my good friend and co-host, Naren and Weah. Good evening, Naren.
Good evening, Chris. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you again.
Nice to see
So
you
we're gonna do a little tag team here, and we're gonna have the topic for tonight's program, and really so glad to have all of you watching tonight, and we're excited to bring forth another broadcast here live on the internet at trinitychannel.com, or also the Trinity Channel and Aramaic Broadcast Network. We have tonight's program, which is 90 minutes in length. The topic for tonight is Islam and the genocide of minorities in the Middle East. Islam and the genocide of minorities in the Middle East. Of course, a topic that's very close, near and dear to Naren's heart, and many of us, obviously, the terrible tragedies that are going on. But we have a lot of ground to cover, a lot of discussion to have. We've got 3 guests calling in on Skype tonight. 2 of them are currently on Skype. One will be joining us in about a half hour. Oh, and welcome back. It's roughly about a half hour after the hour here. Easy for me to say. And again, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we're having our discussion here with our 3 guests, Dr. Richard Schumack, Dr. Tony Costa, and also Edip Yuksel. And we are in the middle of talking about the program. The title for the program tonight is Islam and the Genocide of Minorities in the Middle East. And Naren, you had made some notes, some questions.
Yes.
I'd like to ask them. Edip, Naren has some questions for you.
Some of my background is I'm an activist, so I advocate for the persecuted Assyrian Christians, including, also religiously known as Chaldeans and Syriacs in Iraq and Syria, who are the natives, the indigenous people of those areas, and also minorities such as Yazidis. And I've even advocated for other persecuted between each other sectors of the religious Islamic groups who were innocent and moderate and caught in the crossfires in this horrible genocide. But my question is, it's obviously very evident in the Middle East, and I'm speaking of Iraq and Syria because that's where the current genocide is primarily right now. It is very evident, besides we understand there's a lot of political corruption that's involved of very, very big money that's funding this, of course, but it is evident that Islam there, radical Islam, has been a huge issue, not just because since the rise of ISIS or since the issue that's been going on since the State of Israel has been established. This has been going on, and I could give a report on behalf of our people, the native Assyrians of those areas. We've been suffering this since the rise of Islam. At a point in the Middle East, before Iraq was Iraq, before Syria was Syria, before a lot of those Arab countries were established by countries like the British and the Western countries who played a huge role there, it was known as Assyria. There were, at a point, 30 million Assyrians. Since the rise of Islam, right now we have decreased, just in Iraq alone, as of now, you won't even believe this number. We are 300,000. And my great-grandfathers, just a personal testimony, if nothing else is believed, both of my great-grandfathers were killed by Islamic radicals, particularly Kurdish Muslims, who occupied their lands, and they asked them to convert. They wouldn't convert. One of my great-grandfathers was crucified on a cross. The other one was stabbed to death by 3 different radicals. This is a story that many will tell you from Iraq and Syria, mainly Iraq especially, since we're so vulnerable there. So What is your answer to that? I'm basing it on actual testimonies, on incidences, the reality of what's happening in Iraq. What is your answer to that, Mr. Edip?
What's your name?
Nahran. So my name in Aramaic is Nahran.
Nahran.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I empathize with you. I share your grief and whatever feelings you have against these people who committed this. I am with you. I have no sympathy or empathy for those who commit heinous crimes, especially in the name of God. And I do agree that in that part of the world, and I call them not Muslims, I call them Sunni and Shiite. To me, the definition of Islam is very clear according to the Quran. I translate the Quran into two languages, Turkish and English. In English, one is Quran, a reformist translation. Islam means peacemaking. However, after Muhammad, which you'll learn Muhammad through those murderers or sultans and tyrants, if you are reading the hadith books and seerah and the translations or tafsirs that is polluted through them, is very different. The teaching of Islam is very different, and the teaching of Jesus is very different than teachings of the Catholic Church or Byzantine Empire when they were committing crimes even now. And therefore, when I look at this, I don't look at the people according to when they are oppressed, I don't look at their religion or whether they are atheist or Christian. To me, is a human being is equal to another human being, regardless of their religion and race and gender. Therefore, I am with you, and I think that this is a major problem. In fact, they kill each other throughout history. They kill each other. But it is also valid throughout history. It happened among Christians too. Not only medieval ages, even recently in last century, 2 world war among Christian nations. When there is war, we try to isolate Christians from the war, but in fact, it is there. And you see, when I look at Iraq, and you should not ignore, because the verses of the Bible, one of the verse which is my favorite says, accept the truth so that truth will set you free. Look at Iraq, based on lies, United States attack, and it is supposedly Christian nations, and the government was mostly voted by Evangelical Christians, and killed about, according to Doctors Without Borders, 1 million Iraqis. Do you think dropping bombs from sky, when destroy people, maim their limbs, and either wound them or kill them, children, men, women, if you go down that scene, it is not really a good scene. Therefore, we should empathize with them. We should condemn that too. But when I see Christians and Muslims, I don't know about you. You sound very nice person. But I see some well-groomed guys, they don't have any empathy for Palestinian children who were killed by Israel, because they look at it through lens of religion, or maybe this person is white or this black. I don't look at it. I don't discriminate between a Jew or a Muslim or a Western stuff. To me, we are children of Adam. We are brothers and sisters. We should not, whoever is this, the criminal, the one who commits suicide or genocide, we should all stand against that person, even if it is my relative. Therefore, okay. I am with you, but I think if you want to be effective, you should stand for justice. I invite Christians and Muslims to stand for justice, to condemn the atrocities committed by Christians or Jews or Muslims, regardless.
Right, but Mr. Edip, with all due respect, I really appreciate your testimony, but speaking as of now, what's happening in Iraq and Syria, there are no Christians attacking Muslims. Muslims are at full force in attacking Christianity. As you know, the first city that was invaded was Mosul, Christian-dominated area. All of our homes were marked with N for Nazarene. So it is evident we can't be politically correct with these types of things. There is a radical Islamic ideology, Wahhabism, that is growing, and it's spreading like wildfire, like a cancer throughout the entire region. Even the governments of the country are concerned because the demographics are changing so rapidly. So my question to our two other guests, what do you think would be a great solution as Western countries to collaborate with Arab Islamic countries to resolve this ideology? For example, like the president of Egypt definitely admits that there's a huge issue. Something needs to be revamped. Something needs to be worked on, because these people, some of these radicals, the way they're growing, the way they look at certain things and declare a jihad is their interpretation of certain things. So why are there so many people interpreting this as a radical jihad, to declare a jihad? And, you know, even long before ISIS, we have been suffering jihads. You know, so many Christian families in Iraq, they don't know when they would have been attacked. You know, I recently also lost my aunt to ISIS. You know, this isn't something that's exaggerated, something that's a conspiracy. This is occurring. It is happening today. You know, there was an Assyrian Christian gal in Syria. There were over actually 300 that were kidnapped. We were able to collaborate together with the United States government. We were able to release some of them, you know, and one of them, a young girl, 13 years old, was forcefully married off to an Islamic radical because she was Christian. Now, they wouldn't do that to their own kind, now would they? So it's very unfortunate, and we can't sugarcoat those kind of things. We have to put them on the table. Otherwise, it will be pretty bad for both sides. It will be bad for the Muslims. It will be bad for the Christians. It will be bad for the Jews. We can never coexist if there is a radical. But I'm sorry, Mr. Idip, this question is for Dr. Acosta, Dr. Shumack. What do you believe is... What do you believe is a resolution, a solution for Western countries to collaborate with these Arab countries to revamp something? What do you believe is your solution, your idea?
Well, first of all, the elephant in the room here is the Islamic worldview. Islam as a worldview, and I wish that there was an Islamic version like Mr. Yuksel's, because I've never found one. I've never seen it in the history of Islam, a version like his. But the Islamic version of things is the Sharia. The Sharia is not compatible with democratic values. There is no freedom of religion in Sharia. There is no freedom to express critically your opinion about the Quran, about Muhammad, and so forth. And the issue here is that the idea of equality is counterintuitive to the Quran. Now, Mr. Yuksel said that all human beings are equal, yet the Quran says in Surah 3 about the Muslims that you are the best of all peoples, evolved for mankind, permitting what is good and prohibiting what is wrong. And in Surah 98, I believe, verse 6, it says that the Jews and the Christians, those who do not believe in Muhammad, they are the vilest of all creatures. And so the concept that there is, even the dhimmis in Surah 929 who paid the jizya, these are not first-class citizens. They are subjugated classes. They are humiliated peoples. And what you were sharing with us, sister, about your family and even your grandfather, your great-grandfather, and so forth, this is exactly the pattern that we see. Whenever Islam dominates, Sharia law is enforced, Christians are subjugated, they are given the option, either you convert to Islam or you pay the jizya. And if you don't pay the jizya, then you are to be fought and destroyed. And so I don't think there's a solution to the problem if Sharia law continues. The fact of the matter is some Muslim people, some reformists, want to reform Islam and go back and say, okay, we need to change. But the problem is you cannot reform a system that is fundamentally believed to be perfect and revealed by Allah. So how do you reform that which is perfect? So I think what we have here is unfortunately, we have a dead end unless these nations are willing to embrace democratic values. The problem will never resolve itself.
Well, you know, I appreciate it, Dr. Costa. You know what? We are getting close to our next break. We happen to have a couple of callers on the line who've been waiting patiently. At least one of them has. So I'm gonna actually give at least one of them right now a chance to ask a question, and it's Raphael. And Raphael, I'd like you to say who the question is directed to, and please just ask the question and we'll respond in the interest of time. We're not looking for commentary, if you don't mind. So yeah. Raphael, what is your question and who is it directed to?
Oh, my question is to the gentleman, the Muslim gentleman.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Edip.
Yeah.
Edip Yuksel. What's your question?
My question is, he is reasonable, but Actually, the Islam is not religion. The Islam, it is religion. It is movement covered by a religion. Religion covered to control the world, and they apply the agenda now. One of them, ISIS. I know the guy is not he's not Sunni. He's Shi'i.
Let's hear your question. Let's hear your question.
My question is, they apply the agenda in the Quran. They should change the Quran, and everybody will be happy.
Dr. Yuksel or Edip, what's your response to that?
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
First of all, I am much before you, long before you, perhaps Christians started criticizing, strongly condemning Sharia and Sunni Shiite religions. I was there in 1986, rejecting all these, put my life at risk. I have written a manifesto for Islamic reform. Look at that, you will see. The issue is not a religion. Religion is one of the components. When you don't recognize the main factors of the disease, there are other factors, and that religion is basically lost contribution, then you will not be able to find solution. For example, if a government attacked United States and killed 1/5 of the now 1/20 of the population, 1 million in Iraq, it were 1 out of 20, and 5-6 million Americans here. Do you think that any Muslim here would be safe? Of course, the Christians, they will attack. Even few Christians are being killed here. Now we say, well, let's go kill Muslims or evict them and stuff. Therefore, when you look at it as, please check that Chicago professors' research about the suicide attacks is strong, 95% strong correlation between invasion, imperialistic invasion and massacres and this kind of reaction. As far as for the verses, this gentleman, I will not allow you to attack the Quran unjustifiably because it is not honesty. When you attack the Quran, distort it and twist the verses and condemn the Quran because of ISIS. ISIS is #1 enemy of the Quran, or Saudi Arabia is #1 enemy. You cannot, by looking at the inquisitor, witch hunters, and crusaders, you cannot condemn Christianity or Jesus, the teaching of Jesus. The same way, let me give you an example. Freedom of religion or freedom of expression in the Quran is given to the ultimate measure, like chapter 2, verse 256. La ikraha fi din, there is no compulsion in religion. Chapter 440 says, if you are discussing an issue like with you guys, and you are making mockery of my religion, we are in the same room. And for me, if you are making mockery, you are not engaging in intelligent discussion, the Quran tells me leave their presence and then come back. If they come on their senses, they are able to discuss. That's it. It doesn't say go hurt them, beat them, kill them, anything. This is made up by hadith. It is not in the Quran. As far as verse about you are the best and stuff, of course you are the best, because the Quran describes the community this way. In chapter 49, verse 13 says, be man and woman. I created you man and woman in different tribes and nations. But the best among you is the one who is righteous. And righteousness is defined in the Quran. It means one. Is this one? You are a free person. You don't submit yourself to other than God in terms of absolute submission. You are charitable. You help the poor, the needy. You don't do injustice even against your enemy. You are a peacemaker. You are a loving, caring person. If you are in this case,
are you saying that Saudi Arabia is a huge issue in this?
Absolutely. Saudi Arabia is the head of the snake.
So is it because of their ideology of Wahhabism that is brewing?
Absolutely. Wahhabism basically is based on Sunni teaching. Sharia is absolutely bad. Let me read a few verses. Let me read you few verses.
Before you read those few verses, Dr. Edip, with all due respect, is it okay if we just want to ask Dr. Acosta and Dr. Shumack? Dr. Shumack, what was your idea to resolve this?
One verse from Exodus.
Okay, go ahead. One verse.
Kill witches, perverse polytheists. Another one, it is Joshua 6:21. And okay. There are many verses, hundreds of verses like this in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and even New Testament. Therefore, I cannot use this condemn you guys. Should I?
No, let's, just in the interest of time, we're getting close to a break. Let's let Dr. Shumak respond. Dr. Shumak.
Right. Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Edip, for your ideas. And I agree with you that there are many factors that go into producing terrorism, and they're not all religious. And yes, there's been certainly occupation and people losing their land or feeling oppressed will play into it as well. But I think the key word that you used earlier was hypocrisy. And it is absolutely hypocritical for any Christian who follows Jesus to try and enforce their faith on someone. Now, I don't actually think that's what the US is doing or the coalition is trying to do in the Middle East. It's not a religious war, it's politics. But if there is any religious element, it is hypocritical. And as Tony was saying, the problem for Islam is that it's not at all clear that even if we get rid of the Hadith, even if we don't look at Ibn Ishaq and the traditions, and I think the Quran becomes meaningless without that, but even if we say just the Quran, Islam is still left with a major problem because the Quran is full of injunctions to fight. It's in chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 16, 22, 24, 25, 29. There's this expectations that Muslims will be fighting for the sake of Islam. And that was the example of Muhammad. Clearly, he was not just a prophet. He was a judge. He was a warrior. And so it's clearly hypocritical for Christians to fight for Christianity. It's not at all clear that it's hypocritical for Muslims to fight for Islam, which means that it's not at all clear to me that an Islamist, Wahhabi, jihadist interpretation of the Quran is not legitimate. And so I think the Quran is part of the problem.
Break here. We have one more half hour before we're done with our program tonight. And obviously a lot of heated discussion and a very interesting commentary. We'll be right back as we'll come back after this brief break and come on back with us. Thank you. We're back and so glad that you're here, and it's so great to be here in the studio with you, Naren.
Thank you, Chris. Same here.
You know, and I should have said this, and some have already taken the opportunity to call. For those who would like to call, we have about another half hour before we're done with our program tonight. But the number, for those of you who don't know, and a reminder to those who do, it's 248-416-1300. Again, 248-416-1300. Our technicians are ready to take those calls. And we're going to try to spread this next 30 minutes out as evenly as we can, giving everyone a chance to respond. And so in the interest of time, we do have a caller, and I'm going to ask this caller, Jackie, when she asks, or he, or whoever it is, he or she asks a question, just to say who it's to and what the question is. We don't want to hear commentary. That'll be up to our guests. So please, Jackie, you are on. What is your question? Who is it directed to?
Hi, this is directed to the Muslim gentleman.
Edip Yuksel.
Yes, yes, and because I did watch him the other night too, that he was on, and but here's my concern. My question is, he's referring to Christians' war, Christians fighting supposedly in the name of God or attacking people, and I'd like to know what he's referring to, because number one, in the Bible, there's nothing in the Bible where the Christians are told to go out and massacre people in the name of Christianity. So I'm concerned. He'll say, like he's referring to the United States as a Christian nation, when I think he's confusing politics with actual Christians and what the Bible actually tells us to do, because any type of war, and he keeps referring to the Old Testament, any type of war that was in the Old Testament where God had sent people in to basically, maybe in some cases, annihilate the whole thing, there were many years of warning to these people. These weren't just saying go out and kill these people. I mean, these people were warned, but I'm concerned on who he's referring to as Christians. And
okay, Jackie, we're going to let him answer the question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but again, I think we understand the question. Thank you for watching, and thank you for patiently waiting
Yes,
on the
thank
phone,
you,
and
Jackie. We'll
appreciate
answer
it.
your
We
question.
want more of that, but let's give Edip Yuksel a chance to respond.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't see myself. Should I? Hello?
Hello.
Am I talking?
We hear you.
You hear
Yes,
my
we
voice?
can hear you.
Okay,
We can hear you.
good, good.
So.
I didn't get the clue. Okay.
The question? Can you respond?
First of all, I would like to thank you guys. And I think compared to last night, we have a much better discussion of this issue. I appreciate you are more congenial. Yesterday it was not. I was under kind of attack, many people, and it was very hostile.
We appreciate
It's very
you,
hostile.
Mr.
But
Yuksel.
tonight, I disagree with some of your things, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We can all agree
In
to
fact,
disagree, but what would your answer be to the question?
I invite you too also to my shows. I have a YouTube channel
Okay.
watched by hundreds of thousands. Okay, here it is. Today, there is no Christian government in terms of official Christian, but Christians support government through money and through votes. And the Christian supported governments we see in the Western world, and like a majority of people in Germany, Christians, or in the United States, those who supported Bush, mostly Christians, evangelical Christians especially supported Bush, which committed this, and he was himself a newborn Christian. Therefore, you may not use this because you got convenience. You can kill people at that time, say, well, it is the government killing, but you are financially and personally supporting that. And therefore, I see in this one a schizophrenia in Christianity. And you go sing peace in church, but go vote for more military, more wars. That is a major issue. People around the world, they see this hypocrisy. As far as the things, I do see the problem with the Muslim so-called Muslim theology is Hadith and Sunnah. It is not the Quran. In fact, when I discuss with you, most of the things that is you think it is from the Quran, it is the distortion and pollution of the Sunni and Shiite religion. I have successfully argued and exposed these on TVs and in open public debates with top religious Muslim scholars and with Christians too. I have a book, Peacemaker's Guide to Warmongers. I debated with Robert Spencer. I don't know whether you heard about him. Mm-hmm. It is a lengthy symposium, Robert Spencer, Ali Sina, and Bill Warner. And then they came to me accusing Quran and basically condemning the Quran, but what they were condemning really it was the distortions. Therefore, you need to be able to look at the Quran with a new eye. And as I said, the Leviticus and Joshua, Samuel, Exodus are filled with killing, children, murdering, stoning to death, so much. But you don't bring this against Jewish people because you say, well, they are nice, they are good people. Well, they are committing crimes against Palestinians. You don't accuse their religion. You never bring these verses to condemn them. I do. I think these verses, a lot of them distorted in the Old Testament. I give you one example. Can you
come to a conclusion quickly? We are running out of time. We have a couple more callers.
The conclusion, I come one. The major issue is the clergyman.
Hello?
The major problem is the clergyman. They distort the message of every messenger. Chris.
I'm listening.
Do you hear me? And they distorted like the Old Testament, like stoning to death. It is not in the Old Testament because the word regime, it is in the Quran too. It is not stoning to death. It's never used in the context of adulterer. There's no such a thing in the Quran. It is in Hadith. But in the Old Testament, stoning to death is there. But the word regime means to excommunicate. But in Old Testament, they distorted this word regime from excommunication to stoning to death. And then Sunnis, they got borrowed from Judaic distortion and they started continuing stoning to death. Jews not practicing this anymore because they are not following their religion.
Edip, I'm going to have you wind it up. We're going to give Dr. Costa a chance to respond.
Well, thank you, Chris. All I would say again is, for the honest reader, Edip says the Quran says nothing about killing. Quran 9:5, slay the idolaters wherever you find them, take them captive, besiege them, prepare for them each an ambush. Surah 9:29, to fight against the people of the book who do not accept Muhammad and impose upon them the jizya. Surah 8, I will cast terror into the hearts of your enemies, and so forth. On and on and on. There are jihad verses throughout the Quran. So I think Edip is doing a sanitization job here on the Quran. So I would invite the hearer, the listener tonight, open your Quran, read Surah 9, read throughout Surah 9, and ask yourself, does the Quran teach violence against the unbelievers? Now, Edip keeps bringing up all these Old Testament texts. And of course, the New Testament is very clear that God gave these laws in the Old Testament to Israel. These battles were historical battles. They're not to be repeated. They're not to be imitated by New Testament believers. We're under a new covenant. Jesus said that we are to love our enemies. Those who live by the sword will perish by the sword. And notice he said that none of the Jews impose those laws. That's right. They don't impose those laws because they don't live in a theocracy. They live in a democratic country. Israel is a democratic country. And Jews do not stone people for Sabbath breaking. They don't stone people for adultery. But Sharia states do. And that's the point here, is that it is the world view that dictates what is going on around the world. Now, once again, I would like to know from Mr. Yuksel, where in Islamic history have we ever had a version of Islam the way he describes it? Peaceful coexistence, loving, respecting equal rights. I'm still waiting to hear a response. At what point in Islamic history was there any type of an Islam, according to Edip? And I'm sorry, but Surah 98, verse 6, read it again. It's very clear. Those among the people of the book who do not accept the messenger of Allah, Muhammad, they are the vilest of creatures. That is not talking about equality. And so I leave it to the hearer and to the listener. Don't take me for it. Don't take Edip's words for it. Pick up the Quran, read it for yourself, and let the text speak for itself.
Well said, and I would love to get a response, but we're going to have to give a chance for our callers. We have one more, actually two more.
We have Nabil.
Nabil,
we could put Nabil on the phone.
we're ready with your question, Nabil.
I started a little late on the program, but I would like to forward the question to the Muslim guest,
Yes.
which is he confused the Meccan version with the Medina version, and the Medina version abrogated all the Meccan version, which are the nice ones. Why is he doing that? And he's addressing, like, saying that we as a taxpayer, American taxpayers, supporting the military, then we become invaders. In Egypt and in the Middle East, all the Christians are paying taxes to the government that persecute them.
Let's give him a chance to respond.
Right, and actually I just want to add to that too. Very good question, Nabil. And also, a lot of times the United States is referred to as constantly, you know, it's a Christian nation, it's a Christian nation. They refer to us as if we're like a crusading country. Unfortunately, it's not really. We like to believe that it's a Christian nation, but it really isn't. The United States, especially currently, it's helping Muslims more than Christians in the Middle East. For example, I'll give you my people as an example. We have been begging the United States to help our independent National Guard unit that we established out of our own pocket because so many different national forces there withdrew their troops when we were being attacked by jihadists. The United States did not help us, was not funding us. Instead, they're funding the Kurdish Muslims. So that actually, you know, we're always referred to as a Christian nation, but really Muslims have more rights in the United States than anywhere in the world.
So, Edip, you've got the floor, but be mindful of our time. Would you like to respond? Yes, thank you.
You are 4 people over there with the callers, 6, 7, 8 people. Of course, I don't have time. And I think you will declare victory because the gentleman doesn't have time to respond to you. Well, that's not right. I invite you to have one-to-one discussion this with me. You will have equal time, even more time than I do. I do provide these to my opponents. Here are the verses of the Quran that you take out of the context, like chapter 9, verse 29, you keep repeating. It is the context about people like ISIS, people like Christian crusaders. They are attacking